Okay, it is day 3. This is my third blog of my quarantine series. Creative quarantine. Use the time. Don't let the time use you. Um, basically been a pretty, I don't know, standard day for me. I did some work, exercised. One thing I will say though, I ride my bike pretty much every day. I like to ride up like a big hill. It's my exercise, ride around the neighborhood or go to an area I haven't seen and ride around. And I stay away from people because obviously you got to keep your social distancing. But there are very, very few people on the street in Seattle. Each day it seems like there's just a little bit less than there were the day before. And I pass by apartment buildings and I'll see you can just see the TVs on in every apartment. Um, I hope people are exercising because it's important for your mental health and for everything else during this mess because relieves stress and it keeps you healthy. Anyway, I'm exercising. I'm lifting weights. I'm riding my bike, doing what I can. I have a kettlebell. That thing is great because it's small. You can do a lot of stuff with it. Um, I'm almost 50, so for somebody like my age group, it's I mean, you can still do a lot with it, but I'm not into doing the heavy weights. I did heavy weights when I was young, like in my 20s in high school and whatnot. So it's good. I like it. What I wanted to talk about today was something that has been on my mind a lot, and that is the depression. Um, I'm kind of a strange person, I guess, in modern society because I'm not necessarily as optimistic as most people are around me. I'm a prepper. I mean, I prepped for this whole mess to begin with. Um, uh, Basically, I've been thinking something was going to go horribly wrong, and it did. And I thought it was going to go wrong in the financial system. And the thing that really convinced me that this was going to happen was when I started to study the Great Depression. Now I went to college. I took some history classes. I graduated from Indiana University, go IU, um, and I took like things like sociology and honestly, and the thing that amazed me was how much they taught me about the Communist Manifesto and uh, you know all the rest is under the guise of socialism. Like this, and you see that a lot. I think it's gotten even more extreme. But what I was really interested in, honestly, was FDR, the New Deal. And I've been a big fan of Franklin Delano Roosevelt for many, many years. I'm impressed with what he was able to do and the reasons he was able to do that. And so I'd like to talk about one of the things that led me to basically preparing for this was the way that a lot of the New Deal legislation that had kept our financial system secure was being removed. And I think most people thought it was still there. I guess most people thought we were still running under the same financial system. Like we'd learned our lessons from the Depression and we sort of maintained that. And that's not necessarily true. Um, the big, Roosevelt, the Depression really started in 29 with the crash. The Wall Street crashed in 29. If you look at the market at Wall Street, and there's lots of different aspects of the Depression, but let's just look at, for one second, just look at Wall Street, the market. The market continued down from 29 all the way till 33. And 33 was when Roosevelt came in. And when Roosevelt came in, he came in and his plan was called the New Deal. And it had 3 R's. It was relief, recovery, and reform. So the relief part was relief for the unemployed. And at that point, we had actually had fewer unemployed than we do today. I think the peak of the Depression, unemployment was around 24.9% or something like that. I think currently they're estimating it's going to be around 35%. So obviously that was a big problem. Uh, Recovery, we needed jobs. We needed to get factories running again. We needed we couldn't rely on the government forever, but we're going to need some help, and we needed to get the economy restarted and reform. Like, we had to reform the financial system because not a lot of people realize this, but the financial system prior to the Depression was very unstable. There were these constant boom and bust cycles. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. Um, and and one of the things that Roosevelt really wanted to do was he wanted to reform the financial system. And the set of laws that he did, one of the things that happened, I think it was 33 or 34, was the Glass-Steagall Act. Now, the Glass-Steagall Act separated investment banking and retail banking. Investment banks were the ones that organized around the sale of stocks. And currently, our investment banking really is organized around the derivatives market. Stocks, not so much. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. While retail banking would be like the stuff, commercial banking, the branch on the corner. You put your money in. The idea was you didn't want to have the bank playing around on Wall Street with depositors' money. We got to keep depositors' money safe because we can't have runs on the bank. And in order to stop that, there was a lot of things that came in. One of those was FDIC insurance. So basically, if you put up to $250,000 in the bank, the federal government was going to insure that. That is something that has been chipped away at. Not a lot of people know this, but FDIC insurance is not something that banks really like. They don't want to pay for it. So, because they have to pay for the insurance. So they've wanted to pay less and less and less. Tell me if this sounds familiar. I'm sure, banks are not the most altruistic institutions. Anyway, that's one piece of it. So, and not a lot of people know that there was a time when those had to be separated, and that was a huge part of the reforms that Roosevelt brought in. Now, when I was in school, and I feel like I don't have any real political representation anymore because there's nobody that's FDR was Franklin Delano Roosevelt was around. That was almost 100 years ago, 90 years ago, and not a lot of people think about that anymore. They just don't. And I think that the idea that what socialist or left-wing policies, at least when I was in school, and I think it's even gotten worse, I feel like a lot of the Democratic candidates don't understand the difference between this, Cuban, Marxist, Maduro, centrally planned, authoritarian, communist, socialist type of economy and the type of reforms that FDR or even Johnson brought in, like Social Security, for instance. There's a lot of confusion, I think. At least what I was taught was a lot more of this Communist Manifesto, all the rest, and that was a nightmare. That was horrible. I read Solzhenitsyn, and I think that should be required reading for everyone because all these systems have a good side and a bad side. And you need to understand where it went wrong. And if you read the Communist Manifesto and you don't read Solzhenitsyn, I feel like you are probably getting a very a strange view of the the economy. It's giving you a very an overly optimistic view of centrally planned economies and communism. And a lot of that stuff basically just turns into authoritarianism very, very quickly if you don't have checks and balances on power. Anyway, long story short, I'm a big fan of Roosevelt. What I wanted to see with this mess that we're in, because we're in a very, very, very serious mess, and I'm going to tell you, I think, how we eventually get out of this mess. I think we're going to bring back the New Deal and relief. We're going to create jobs. I think it was called the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Tennessee Valley Authority. We basically did great public works projects that employed a lot of people. And it got a lot of, and as long as people weren't starving and could get a little bit of money to their families, and FDR, that was a great thing. And that's important. I think what we're currently trying to do is we're trying to basically reinflate the bubble, push money back into companies that already shouldn't have received anything in the first place. That basically we need to create a system where they can aren't taking this type of risk. They're not doing stock buybacks. And by the way, stock buybacks were not even legal until 1984. Not a lot of people know that. But a lot of the stuff that we have that we consider normal is relatively new. Like, for instance, those laws that came in with Roosevelt, Glass-Steagall, a lot of that stuff was overturned with things like the Securities Modernization Act of 2001. And that came in under Clinton. He was a big proponent of that. And I hate to mention these names because whenever you mention a Republican or a Democrat, then the whole conversation just sidetracks because it turns into, well, we have to score points for our side, or we have to score points so this guy screwed up, or this guy screwed up. There's a lot of blame go around, and it's not even, it's kind of beside the point. Basically, most of these politicians, Republican or Democrat, have been on one team, and that team is Team Wall Street. Whatever Wall Street wants, they're going to give them. Until you get to a situation like we have now, where we have this virus. This was a black swan event. Nobody predicted it was going to happen. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to reinflate a system that really didn't work. A system that gave us the 2008 crash, a system that's given us massive wealth inequality. And we have a wonderful, wonderful system that our forefathers left us. It was called the New Deal. We've been here before. We know how to get out of this. And the New Deal is something that's going to be extremely hard for Wall Street to swallow, and it's going to be extremely hard for the business class in America to swallow, especially after, after Reaganism and this strange worship they have of markets. Markets, everything's got to be a market. The efficiency of markets, and I think markets are definitely an ingredient in the economy, but they're not everything. And I don't think this idea that markets create efficiency is only accurate if you have a very markets only become efficient if you have a very quick turnaround cycle. What I mean by that is, for instance, if I create a market for bubblegum and I create and and I want to sell a new kind of bubblegum, and my bubblegum is delicious. Everybody buys my bubblegum. Oh my God! Well, bubblegum could easily be, the market easily regulates bubblegum, because if you make bad bubblegum, nobody buys the bubblegum. But if you make bad health insurance, it might be, 40 years before you figure out that, oh, by the way, my health insurance is not going to cover that cancer. I've been paying into it for 40 years. What do you mean it's not going to cover that cancer? Because there's not that quick cycle where I don't understand really what I bought. I'm reliant upon this contract. There's not a quick cycle. If I immediately knew that my health insurance, if I got cancer 2 minutes after I bought health insurance and found out my health insurance didn't cover it, and then cured myself, and then I could do it over and over and over again, obviously health insurance would improve because there'd be a very quick feedback cycle. But the problem is, with a lot of things, it's not. It's just a promise. And the way you're going to make money on that promise is by really not fulfilling the promise. And that's kind of the reason that something like health insurance, I think, works better when it is, when there's a single payer option. That's a market-based argument for single payer, is that health insurance will never be an efficient market. It just doesn't work. The dynamics of how people use and buy health insurance are not the same as how people use and buy bubblegum. Bubblegum, great market. Health insurance, probably not. Anyway, I've been very disappointed to see that people are not talking about FDR. I feel like the Democrats are stuck in this strange, cultish, they're talking about, Cuba and Maduro and all the rest of this, and these centrally planned economies that don't work. I mean, that's been a nightmare from the beginning. But we have a plan. We have something that did work. If you want to talk about socialism that worked, we got that. That's called FDR. That's Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Great Society. We had a lot of wonderful programs out there. And I'm kind of disappointed that that's not coming back around. I'm disappointed that people aren't saying, well, what did FDR do? Because we had a way out of this. Well, here's my prediction as to what will happen. It took 4 years, from 29 to 33, before it started to turn around, and thank God the country elected Roosevelt. I think that we're gonna be in for a rough ride, and we're gonna make every possible mistake we can. And Wall Street's going to be able to blame a lot of this stuff on the virus, but basically the virus just exposed how weak our economy is, how much consumer debt we have, how much I mean these stock buybacks. It's a mess, and it took 4 years before Roosevelt came in. 4 years before we really got on top of it. But the big advantage that we have now is we can look back at history and we can look at what Roosevelt did. And he left us a great blueprint as to how to fix this. And eventually, when all the bad ideas have been tried, that's where it's going to end. We're going to go back to the New Deal. We're just going to dust it off, pull it off the shelf. Oh, you know, what was in Glass-Steagall? Bretton Woods setting that was in '44, and that set it set basically. I think it pegged exchange rates. We're also going to need to get rid of the derivatives market. The derivatives market was not legal um, before the Securities Modernization Act. The derivatives market needs to go. It creates a massive amount of leverage. Instability. I mean, some of the things that led to the Depression were buying stock on margin. Wall Street has leverage now. It's not that much different. And the people I would like to really honestly give a shout out to on how help me understand a lot of this stuff. First of all, and I hate to say this, she used to be one of my biggest heroes, Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren understood so much about she specialized in bankruptcy law, and she understood so much about where Wall Street went wrong, and I greatly appreciate the things that I learned from Elizabeth Warren. And I am not in any way supporting her presidential campaign or any of the rest of that. When she first ran, I gave her money, and then it just turned into a mess. But she does deserve a lot of credit. The second person I would like to, if you're interested, Max Kaiser. Max Kaiser is on Russian RT America. He has a show. He basically, I like his point of view. I feel like we are stuck in a system where, oh, wait a minute, my lighting just went out. Sorry about that. I think I can fix that. Whoa, there we go. That's better. Okay, Max Kaiser. He's on RT America. Gotta listen to him. Great guy. Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff is like so libertarian. And none of these people, I believe everything they say. I should preface that with this. But they all have different perspectives that I think when put together has sort of heavily influenced my perspective. Peter Schiff, I like him. I mean, it's strange that I would mention both Elizabeth Warren and Peter Schiff, but I'm not one for like all this partisan whatever. It's silliness. I don't really want to deal with that. So those are basically kind of the three people, and especially Max Kaiser. Out of everyone, no one has really influenced my thoughts about this more than Max Kaiser. There's one other person I would like to say. She's a Republican, Sheila Bair. Sheila Bair has been a great critic of Wall Street. I think she was comptroller of the currency. I could have that wrong. But she has been a very great, an outstanding critic of Wall Street. I am looking for the politician that gets up and says, we are going to, I understand, what I want to implement is the New Deal. I want to go back and I want to look at what Roosevelt was doing. He gave us a great blueprint on how to get out of this. We're going to do that. We got to get past this whole virus thing. And my heart goes out to anybody out there who's struggling with this right now, who's lost a family member, who's lost friends. I'm truly sorry for you. And as Americans, I feel like, it's go time. We just got to get it together. You got to, we're going to have to pull together. You got to get, people going to have to get personally disciplined, because you got to keep yourself together. I'm sorry to say that, but you just do. I'm sorry for anyone that's lost a job. Sorry for anybody that's out there that's struggling right now. Really, honestly, my heart goes out to you. But we can get through this. We will get through this. And honestly, I think that we are going to be, at some point in the future, a much, much better country because we got through this. It's still in us. We just got to get there. And we sort of got to come together around it. We just do. Anyway, that is tonight's diatribe on the New Deal and Roosevelt.